Joining us now, trial attorney Brian Claypool. Brian's been listening to this trial as well. Do you think the prosecution has successfully presented their case so far?
Hey, Marnie, always great to see you. Yeah, I think the prosecution has done an exceptional job of establishing a very clear timeline, starting when Ibarra allegedly was a peeping Tom. Remember, earlier in the morning, he tried 6 times to get into this house, twice opening the screen door. And the girl inside the apartment identifies the person as, the black hoodie, the black pants that matched what Ibarra was allegedly wearing on the running trail. So it starts with that. And then you have a witness on the running trail that, 20 minutes before Laken was assaulted, she identifies a man looking like that again with the black sweatshirt, hoodie sweatshirt, standing still with a cup. A cup was identified, him holding it also when he did the peeping Tom event earlier in the morning. And then you just have, the smartphone call at 9:11. Laken likely fights till about 9:28. That helps because it proves she's fighting. And then you've got the DNA of Ibarra under the fingernails of Laken Riley, which is huge. And then you got a left thumbprint on the smartphone that matches the DNA of Ibarra. And then you've got the hair of Laken in the black hoodie they found. And I think one of the really important witnesses in the case, Marnie, is the person that identified on the video. There was somebody that discarded the clothing in the trash bin, and then you had a witness say that it resembled Ibarra. That is huge, I think, as well. And then you've got the scratches on both arms, a bump on his face, and he had real trouble trying to explain away those scratches and the bump, Marnie. So I think when you combine the physical forensic evidence with the circumstantial evidence identifying him on the trail just before it happened, I think, unless he does testify, he's looking at a guilty verdict.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence just continues to pile up against him. I'm wondering what his defense's strategy becomes and how do they refute some of those key pieces of evidence, particularly the scratches, unexplained, and the DNA under her fingernails.
Yeah, so Marnie, as I see it, he's only got a couple of angles here to try to defend this. One is nobody has really given 100% identification of his face. So remember, I just mentioned the girl that had the peeping Tom incident and earlier in the morning of the murder. She could not identify with certainty his face. And I don't think that the girl on the running trail just prior to Laken being assaulted was able to specifically identify his face as well. So he, unless he takes the stand, he's got to take the stand, in my opinion, and say, that wasn't me. Nobody's identified my face on that trail. The second item that I think is really important is, and maybe you could tell me if they have found this, but the actual rock. Remember, the argument is that Ibarra took a rock and, crushed Laken's skull. Her skull was crushed in many different places, and then the alleged asphyxiation after. But where is the rock, right? Because usually in a murder case, you like to have the weapon that caused the death. And I'm not sure they have that rock. And that would be another argument that his lawyers would make. And then the third argument that I would think they'll try to make, possibly through the brother coming in to testify, is some kind of alibi about where Ibarra was at the time of the murder. Is somebody going to come into court and say, hey, wait a minute, at 9:11 a.m., he was over here. He was hanging out with me, in the school cafeteria, or, hanging out in my apartment. He's going to need to have somebody come in and try to give some kind of explanation as to his whereabouts at the time Laken was killed.
I'm being told, Brian, to answer your question about the rock, the murder weapon in this case, and the investigators do, in fact, have the rock that they say was used to hit Laken Riley over the head. So that is also a key piece of evidence. When it comes to the possibility that he testifies, it's a Hail Mary. If you are his attorney and he is getting ready to take the stand in his own defense, what would you tell him?
Yeah, I would tell him that he's got to do a better job of explaining, for example, his whereabouts and explain, for example, the scratches on his body. Marnie, that was huge. Remember when he was questioned about that? He really had no other explanation. He's like, oh, these are scratches. But he didn't say where those scratches came from. So if he takes the stand, he's going to have a better explanation. For example, hey, I've got a dog, or I was hanging out with somebody the day before. They had a dog, and the dog, scratched my arm. Something to explain those physical marks on his body, number one. And then number two, if he takes the stand, his only hope, in my opinion, he's got to get up there and say, hey, that wasn't me. Nobody's identified me. That's not me. I was not on the trail at 9/11. And here's where I was. I was hanging out. I went to a coffee shop at 9 o'clock in the morning, or I went somewhere. I went to the laundromat at 9 in the morning, and that's where I was. So those are the two key pieces of advice I would give him. He unequivocally is going to have to come up with some explanation as to where he was, or he's toast. And then he's got to talk about, he might have to also say, Marnie, hey, look, that black hoodie doesn't match a hoodie that I own, right? At least try to create some kind of doubt in the judge's mind. That clothing doesn't exactly match what I own as well. He would have to get up on the stand and talk about that. But remember, this is a bench trial with one judge. I would have never agreed to that. Criminal defense attorneys never agree to bench trials because that really eliminates the possibility of getting a hung jury, because there's only one juror, and that's the judge.
Well, we'll know soon enough. The defense is going to have their chance to make their argument here shortly as the prosecution calls their final witnesses. Brian, thank you as always for your expertise.
You bet. Thank you, Marnie.